we've got a new Speaker of the House. Can you believe it? Mike Johnson from Louisiana. Speaker Mike Johnson. We spent a big portion of the show yesterday having, as we talked about that breaking news, going through line by line all of the ways in which Mike Johnson actually seems like a pretty good guy for the job, despite being mostly unknown to the broader public. He's taken a lot of really important, strong, conservative positions through the years. He is now in his 7th year in Congress, and he's got a big job now going forward. For more on what to make of all of this, I want to bring in the president of FreedomWorks now, Adam Brandon, who joins us on the phone. Adam, great to have you back with us, sir.
Well, thanks very much for having me on, and I'm really happy we're not talking about another round of votes and going back to committees and trying to figure out who the next speaker is. We can finally start talking about legislating again.
If I'm not mistaken, Adam, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like last time you and I spoke, you were predicting that it was going to be somebody that nobody was talking about, and sure enough, it's Mike Johnson. Adam, what do we make of this?
Well, one thing I've got to say about Mike Johnson is that he's always kind of been close to leadership in the sense of like someone that people feel could be a leader. But the biggest problem he had is that Republicans and Democrats, they always want to have geographic diversity on the leadership team. And with Scalise coming from Louisiana, he kind of found himself, on the odd man out when the music stopped and the chairs were all taken.
Right.
Elise Stefanik kind of got his seat. So this is, in some ways, is a pretty beautiful poetic justice where someone who is very capable, but for some reasons outside of their own control, never were able to have the shot. Wow. Now you get to call him speaker.
Yes, that's right. And so if we look back at the career he's already had, and that includes his time as a constitutional lawyer for decades, fighting for religious liberty, amazing work there. He becomes a member of Congress, and during that time, he's fought for any number of conservative things. He's got high scores on all the conservative scorecards. He's very strong on the Second Amendment. He's very strong on the border. He wants to stop illegal immigration. He wants to get the budgets under control. He believes very strongly in the sanctity of life. It's hard to find something to dislike Mike Johnson on. Adam, how do you assess him in terms of the career he's already had?
Well, I think you nailed it right there. But one thing I will say in my personal interactions with the man and what I hear from everybody else, he's just a likable guy. Too often in politics, people have these either larger-than-life personas or these gruff personas. Johnson's always been kind of a quieter guy, but a friendly guy. He's the type of guy who greets you with a strong handshake and a smile. So I'm not surprised when you saw hardcore Freedom Caucus guys be like, yeah, this is an improvement over people that we've been voting on.
Yes.
And then also you have other people like moderate members from Northeast Pennsylvania that are like, we may disagree, but we've always had an honest and open conversation with him. He's always been respectful. And that's what you kind of need. That's kind of a temperament you need on a pretty, a very narrow majority that you have with Republicans right now. So he may just be exactly what the doctor ordered. One
of the questions you can't help but ask, at least among friends, when you talk about politicians in Washington is, who owns them? Right? You look and you're saying, like, to what extent are they corrupted by special interests? Who are their big donors? Who's making, who's really pulling their strings? And what's interesting about Mike Johnson, and I'd love to get your reaction here, Adam, is that he's not a man of huge means. He's not a super wealthy dude. In fact, I've seen multiple reports in the last 24 hours that he's of very modest means. He may have a negative net worth, actually. He's got a little bit of debt to his name. His salary seems to be only from his $170,000 or so from being a member of Congress. That's a good salary. It's better than most Americans. And he also is receiving a little bit of coin, like $30,000 from Liberty University for some doing adjunct teaching over there. But beyond that, he's not one of these super wealthy guys. He's not Darrell Issa. He's not Bob Menendez with gold bars in the closet, as far as we're aware. So he's a modest means guy, and he hasn't been really a big part of leadership. He kind of had an assistant gig over at the RSC, but hasn't had this like big leadership position. So to me, these are kind of assets, Adam, a guy who's not already bought and paid for.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting to me to watch this is that it's been explained to me by several members in the caucus. Kevin McCarthy is still going to be there. Kevin McCarthy is still going to be your guy who's raising money ahead of this election. And that's always been McCarthy's strong suit. So McCarthy is not resigning. He's still there. He's going to be doing the part of the job that he probably did the best at. And then you look over, and Jim Jordan, it's not exactly like Jim Jordan's just going back to his committee. I mean, Jim Jordan has risen in stature and has probably the best toehold over the strongest part of the entire Republican caucus. So he's going to have a big say in the direction of everything.
Totally.
And then you've got someone like a Johnson who's got, because he's not the one who's going to, and I'm sure he's going to do his fundraising. Of course he has to. But I think his main job is to hold this caucus together and get things done. And he may look like a nice guy, and he may be a really affable guy, but I'm pretty comfortable seeing him sit down with Schumer and Biden and bash some things out.
Yeah.
I actually am pretty confident. Someone compared him to like a Boy Scout with a switchblade in his back pocket. Someone who he's totally, his experience, he's not going to be outmatched going into the Oval Office when they start really getting down to some of these budget conversations.
No, he's made arguments on some of the biggest stages. I believe he argued before the Supreme Court, in his religious liberty cases and conducting this litigation. So he's not a man who is going to be just blindsided by having the big talks, which is good. And on Jim Jordan for a moment, Adam, I was telling friends last night, I almost feel like this is an even better outcome than if Jim Jordan would become Speaker of the House. And here's why. I like Jim Jordan a lot. He's a fierce conservative. He's great at advocating all sorts of things. I have been concerned about the extent to which that Jim Jordan is compromised by big tech. We don't have that issue now. He's not going to be Speaker of the House. He's still going to be forceful. He's going to be right there at the top of the Judiciary Committee fighting for all of these things in public. That's a great position for him to be in. It's hard for me to imagine how this could have turned out better, actually.
Well, in retrospect, when you look back on it, it did turn out pretty well. Now, I do know, again, going to some of the members I've been talking to, they were really exhausted being stuck in the same room with a bunch of other people. A lot of nerves got frayed. So they were kind of like they had to come up with someone who they liked and they all could agree upon. Now, going forward, the hard part is keeping this coalition together. You're going to have a CR, and that's going to give you space to get these appropriations bills done,
right,
to set up these conversations with Schumer and with Biden. So, as much as I hate CRs, I think there's just no way you're going to get it done in a week.
Well, the idea is to buy some time.
Gonna have to do something.
And in Mike Johnson's case, Mike is not the guy who agreed to the deal that McCarthy did. Mike's going to have to establish his own agreement with all these conservatives going forward. But you can't hold him to Kevin McCarthy's promises, especially with such a short window. He does need a little space to be able to get these bills passed. But beyond that, going into next year, no excuses. You've got to do it on time.
Well, I mean, that's what these bills aren't. A lot of them are close to the finish line. It's not like he's going to start over from scratch.
Right.
A lot of the stuff is 80, 90% there. But at the root of all of this, those spending bills, they were supposed to be done by June.
Yeah.
So that you have time to get these things through committee and all of that. And I think the big thing is just to avoid another one of these giant, dirt sandwiches of an omnibus bill. That's what everyone's really trying to get away from. And so if we haven't really done that since I think I was a freshman in college, 1995, 1996,
right,
something like that. So, okay, it's been difficult, but if we could actually get to have a speaker right now that we get these bills done in June and set a new precedent of how the House should operate, that's going to be good for a lot of things. And then I also have to put a plug in for something that Johnson has agreed to do and that other members are. And some people may say this is punting, but I think it's actually really important, is this fiscal debt commission. We've got a massive problem with our entitlement programs. You're really not going to get your handle on the debt and deficit until you deal with those in the long run. And so I was very pleased when I saw that Johnson enthusiastically supported putting a commission together next year to tackle, while you're doing all these appropriations, while you're doing the rest of it, you can walk and chew gum and also have part of the body working on thinking about the long run, how we're going to do these entitlements over the next 10, 20 years.
Do you think
and not bankrupt?
I always get nervous, though, with these Washington commissions and blue ribbon committees. Do you think they're actually going to do something worthwhile?
That's my hope.
Yeah.
I hope to lean in on it because I hope this is important. Look, we're at $33.6 trillion today. In 10 years, we're going to be at 50, and 95% of that debt's driven by Social Security and Medicare. And look, if my mom and dad are listening in Cleveland, Ohio, they would know that they need, like, those programs are important to them. They've been promised to them. They're in their 1980s. So in younger generations, I just finished up a poll with millennials, and almost no millennials think there's going to be any Social Security or Medicare left over for them. So this is a massive intergenerational, serious, this is bigger than party. You get this wrong, you could bankrupt the country. So, I have high hopes at this point. But it's going to depend on, let me see who's actually on the committees. But I have hopes that this is at least the start of a serious conversation.
Yeah. Social Security, it's interesting. I do wonder what you think on this. I imagine you probably don't want to lift the caps, but Social Security, the limit of your income is $168,000, I think, right now. And then beyond that, you don't get taxed on Social Security anymore. It's like, oh, you've reached your limit for the year. You don't have to get taxed anymore. And I always thought that was interesting because it's regressive. It's like you'd think, well, if we're going to make it solvent, then, maybe just get rid of the caps and everybody always has to kind of have the same skin in the game.
Well, there's some of that. There's also means testing. But I think in the long run, the real opportunity here, especially for younger folks, is to give them some options to opt into to move some of that money into more 401k type setups. That's how real intergenerational wealth gets built up.
Yeah.
So actually, Social Security is going to be an easier thing to deal with in the long run. It's Medicare. It's Medicaid. It's the fact that the U.S. budget for healthcare is infinity. One of my great disappointments in my career, I worked really hard to stop Obamacare, and there were several opportunities. And what's happened? Well, Obamacare has continued to kind of collapse into single payer, and that's coming up. And the budget in the United States for healthcare is infinity. That doesn't work.
No.
So we're going to have to think about some ways that you put market incentives to hold the cost. But I think I want to do things that you increase that patient-doctor relationship. I want to do things that you put markets on top of this so that you have competition. I got LASIK eye surgery a few years ago, and it was amazing, the competition for that surgery. So there's a lot of little things that you got to do to solve these problems. And again, I'm optimistic. I just think in our political climate, sometimes maybe you do need a commission that could take a deeper look. But again, you're going to have to put serious people on this commission. I mean, if I look up and I see AOC on the commission, I'm going to lose a little bit of my hope and enthusiasm.
I don't know. Wasn't she like an economics major or something? She should be great at this, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, yeah, I studied economics and she studied economics. I don't know if we read the same book.
No, I doubt it. I very much doubt it. I'm not even sure she read the book. Adam, thank you very much for your time today. The president of FreedomWorks. Really appreciate your assessment of new speaker Mike Johnson, everything else going on in this crazy town. Thank you, sir.